Good morning. Welcome on this webinar. Thanks for AIVC for organizing this webinar. I will talk about the Belgian ventilation inspection database. A short overview of my presentation. I will give some context about this database. What is the process? How is data put into this database? Who has access to this database? So what is inside this database, and how do we keep the content reliable by organizing surveillance on the data and how it is put in the database? I will briefly show some result and with a short summary of what I talked about. So the context is the EPB regulation. So it's only available in the ventilation inspection database is only available in Flanders. So it's a bit a nuancing of the title of my presentation. We only have it running in Flanders, so in the upper part of Belgium. What is defined is in 2015, there was a ministerial decision that a ventilation pre-design should be made up before the works on the building start. And by the end of the works, a ventilation performance report should be available in order to finalize the EPB registration of the building. This should be done under guidance of a quality framework. It was prescribed, and it applies to building permits after the 1st of January of 2016 in Flanders. So we have about 10 years of data now. It applies only to residential buildings which are newly built or undergo a major energetic renovation. Then about 5 years later, in 2020, there came some rules about how this quality organization should be organized and how the supervision should be organized. So we have to do 10% on-site audits on the ventilation inspections that are performed, and also 10% desktop audits of reports that are loaded into our database. So we have to check also the reliability of the data in our database and also the reliability of the inspections that are performed. Maybe I will have to explain a bit further the EPB process in Flanders, because maybe it's a bit specific. Everything starts in Belgium with a building design, which is mandatory made up by an architect. If the building design is validated, then you get a building permit. In theory, you can start to build. But before that, you also have to make an EPB start declaration before the first brick is laid, and this has to be done by an EPB assessor, and it gives an estimation before the work starts of the energy performance and the indoor climate of the building. And then the building process can start with foundations and walls, and at a certain moment in time, windows are placed with eventually trickle vents if natural ventilation is used in this dwelling, and further on ducting is put in and a ventilation unit may be installed. And finally, the building is finished and occupied, and at the latest 6 months after occupation, there should be done an EPB registration again by an EPB assessor, and this gives the as-built energy performance and indoor climate of the building. And this whole process can take up to about 2 years, which is important to state because we have this ventilation pre-design that should be included in the EPB start declaration, and we have the ventilation performance report that should be available at the EPB registration. So in our database, we know that it's about 1 year and 9 months between those two documents that are made up. How is this process going in our online platform? So you start with opening a file. Therefore, you have to be qualified as coordinator in the quality framework. In the best of all worlds, this starts from the EPB pre-calculation in order to have you're talking about the same dwelling with the same rooms in it, in the ventilation reporting and in the EPB reporting. So it's better to start from what is already available in the EPB platform. The next thing is the ventilation pre-design. Therefore, you have to be qualified as a ventilation designer. The outcome of this process is a PDF file which contains a plan of the dwelling with an indication of the ventilation system, with a front page giving a reference code that is necessary to introduce the declaration of start at the Flemish Energy Agency, the public authority that is guiding the energy performance of buildings in Flanders. And then some later on during the process, you have to order a ventilation system. Therefore, you need design specifications of the ventilation system. It's also available in our database, and with that you can go to the installer of the ventilation system, ask an offer, and specify what kind of ventilation system you would have installed in your home. The next step is then assign the different ventilation inspectors. So a ventilation system can consist of natural supply openings, so trickle vents on top of a window, the air that is transferred through the dwelling by transfer openings from the dry rooms to the wet rooms. You can have natural exhaust openings, but these are rarely used in Belgium. And in most cases, you have a mechanical ventilation system installed, and this inspection is done by an inspector in mechanical ventilation. So all of these people put together their findings on the ventilation system in what we call a ventilation prestation performance report. And especially for the inspection on the mechanical ventilation, these people also have to introduce planning on when they are on site, so we can do audits on site together with the inspectors of the mechanical ventilation system to check if the airflows are measured correctly. And with this ventilation performance report, this can be communicated again to the EPB assessor, which can finalize then the EPB registration in the database of the Flemish Energy Agency. So it is communicated in two versions: a VPV file, which is not readable by humans, but can be directly introduced also in the database of VECA, and a PDF version that is readable for the owner of the building, and which contains also the information on the ventilation system installed in the dwelling. Who has access to this database? Well, of course, our back office colleagues for help desk, for helping with registrations of ventilation performance reports, and also to organize the logistics of sending authors to the different ventilation inspections that are going on. Our team of BCCA auditors has also access to this database, because they have to check the planned inspections, they have to check the inspection reports that are in the database, and they also make a comparison with measurement results they saw on site with the inspection reports that are in the database. Recognized ventilation inspectors, they also have to have access, because they are introducing the data in our database, and they have to be qualified. I will come back on that later in the presentation. And of course, the public and the public authorities also have limited access to the results of the database. So who can become a ventilation inspector? Well, everybody involved in the building process. It's a very open system we've put in place in order to convince the whole market and to motivate all parties to deliver quality. As long as you're qualified and you sign an agreement with BCCA, you can have access to the database as ventilation inspector. So we have different people that are working together on the same project, which might seem complex at first sight, but might lead to a more efficient way of working in the end, as the different parties can report on the different aspects of a ventilation system. So how is the qualification process going on? We have a voluntary training of 1 day available. So in 1 day, we cannot explain how to design and how to install a ventilation system. So we focus strictly on just how to report on ventilation systems. If you want to be qualified, you have to pass a theoretical examination. So for each of the aspects of ventilation systems, there's a separate theoretical online examination available with about 10 to 50 multiple choice questions. It's an online exam. Only for measuring airflows, for mechanical ventilation, there you also need to pass a practical examination in order to get qualified. And as soon as you sign the agreement with the certification body, so with BCCA, which can be done online, you can appear in the list of available ventilation inspectors on our website. Public and public authorities have also access to the database in a way that this is a ventilation performance report, the front page, and on the front page you can find this link, and with the reference code you find here, you can check whether this ventilation performance report is valid, if it's available, and if you still have the latest version. So if different versions exist, you can go through the different versions that exist. You can check if the document you have is still valid and available for your ventilation system. So what does a ventilation pre-design look like? So it's one of the documents that is available in the database. It contains the administrative data about the dwelling, and mainly it goes about plans on which a ventilation system is roughly indicated. So you see here on this floor, you have 3 bedrooms with natural supply through trickle vents above the windows, each giving 75 cubic meter per hour. And then the air is transferred to the wet rooms by gaps under the door. So it's clearly indicated how the air is going through the window, and it is extracted in the bathrooms. So you see here is an extract valve foreseen of 75 cubic meter per hour. It will be mechanical exhaust. And you see here also an indication of the ducting that is necessary to install this ventilation system. So it gives a rough estimate on how the project is impacted by installing a ventilation system, which might be very important information for the builder, for the building owner, before the project starts. So this document should be available before the first brick is laid, and the building owner should be informed about this ventilation pre-design. The second document that is available in our database is the ventilation performance report, which contains a complete report about the ventilation system. So all rooms with their typology, their surface, and how the supply and extract flow is going. So if you take an example of a bedroom here, the ventilation is done by natural ventilation with this type of trickle vent installed, which has a variable length, and so you see here the actual length installed. And if you know the supply airflow, but for 1 meter of this trickle vent, you can calculate the actual supply air that is delivered to this bedroom. We also have information about the transfer, how the air is transferred through the building. So this bedroom is connected to a corridor by a gap under the door of 94 square centimeters, and then you can calculate the theoretical airflow capacity underneath the door, which should be sufficient in this way. And then for mechanical ventilation, for this kitchen, the airflow is measured directly. So this kitchen has a mechanical extract of 82 cubic meters per hour. So it's directly measured by the ventilation inspector. So natural ventilation is calculated based on product data and the length of the trickle vents. We also have information about the fans and ventilation unit installed in the dwelling, and if present, there is also information about the demand controlled ventilation. And for this, we make a coupling with the EPB product database, which is a database with checked and trusted performance data of ventilation components. If you want reliable content in the database, you have to organize surveillance. So mechanical ventilation reporters have to announce every measurement in the database, also with the planning, and when they're on site, they have to send an SMS so we know in real time where in Flanders ventilation inspections on the mechanical ventilations is going on. They have to register their measurements in the database, and we can then perform unannounced audits during or just after the measurement in order to avoid any changes to the ventilation system afterwards or discussions about meteorological conditions who also can affect the measured airflows. So I think I discussed this already in previous presentations, that we have an efficient auditing system operating where we go on site and check ventilation inspectors and motivate them to report in a reliable way in our database. It's not only about mechanical ventilation, also for example here for transfer openings, you have to give some guidance on how to measure the surface underneath the door and the gap of the door. So what is happening when you have this profile installed at between two floors, between two rooms. For guidance also for mechanical ventilation, how to measure what is possible, what is not possible. I discussed this also already in previous presentations. So we have also guidance there available on our website, what is possible when measuring mechanical airflows. The results are passed through the Flemish Energy Agency, VK, so they have data publicly available. We only facilitate the data transfer to their databases, and I give you two examples on the data that they have publicly available on their website. So here you can see the type of ventilations in new buildings from 2006 on. The evolution on the type of ventilation system, and also for renovated buildings, a graph is available. So for more details, I refer to the database of VK. And so to end my presentation, we have a database running for about 10 years now, with ventilation pre-designs in it and ventilation performance reports, which contain a complete description of the ventilation system installed in the dwelling. And I emphasize the importance of keeping the data reliable by organizing an efficient surveillance system. And everything is in relation with energy performance of buildings. So it's completely in relation with EPB regulations in Flanders. So this was my presentation of the database we have running, and I'm happy to share, to answer any questions about this presentation now.